A millionaire catches Maid dancing with his deaf twins. What they did next in the kitchen shocked him. Alexander Hayes's mansion stood tall in the quiet suburbs of the United States. Designed by his own celebrated hands, it had once been hailed as the masterpiece of a brilliant architect. Yet behind its gleaming walls, the grandeur was nothing but a mask. The house was not a home, but a tomb of memories, echoing only with grief. 3 years earlier, Clara, his wife, had died giving birth to their twin boys. From that moment, Alexander's life collapsed. The vast mansion drowned in heavy silence, every corner echoing with the absence of the woman he had lost. The twins, Liam and Lucas, were born into tragedy. Deaf since birth, they had never heard music, never uttered the word Papa. Alexander loved them, but grief built a wall between his heart and theirs. He cared for them out of duty, yet his soul remained locked away, as though any closeness would only tear open the wound that never healed. Day after day, the children drifted through their own small world, eyes vacant, footsteps hollow. Laughter did not exist in that house. Silence became the rhythm of their lives, a sorrowful song that played endlessly. And then one day, a woman entered, Sofia Morales. No fame, no grandeur, only warmth carried in the simplest of gestures. She was hired to manage the household, yet her presence seemed to bring with it something the mansion had lost long ago: life. No one, not even Alexander, could have guessed that from the moment Sophia stepped inside, a journey of healing would begin. A story of loss, of fragile hope, and of how love can return in the most unexpected places. In her first days at the Hayes mansion, Sophia quickly sensed the strange rhythm of the house. It was not the rhythm of life, but the rhythm of silence. Each morning, as sunlight slipped through the glass windows, the air inside remained as heavy as mist that refused to lift. Liam and Lucas, the small twin boys, rarely came near her. They often sat motionless in their chairs or wandered the long hallways with eyes fixed to the floor as if searching for something invisible. There was no mischief, no bursts of childhood energy. Only emptiness. Alexander was no different from a shadow haunting the very home he had built. He moved briskly from his office to his private rooms, hardly ever pausing. His words were sparse, clipped, and never wasted. To Sophia, it seemed as if he lived merely to fulfill obligations, nothing more. Day by day, Sophia felt her chest tighten. She had once been accustomed to laughter, to the vibrant sounds of ordinary life. Here, every step she took echoed through the hollow corridors like a voice in a cavern. This silence was not peace. It was a wall that shut out every human feeling. One morning, while preparing lunch, Sophia glanced at the twins seated at the small table. They sat still, their hands resting on their laps, their eyes vacant. A sharp ache rose in her chest. Was this to be their childhood? Days that passed without laughter, without a single word spoken? The thought constricted her heart. She drew a deep breath, continued chopping vegetables, but inside a restless tide surged stronger and stronger. Sophia knew she had only been hired to care for the house, but her heart refused to remain a bystander. These boys deserved more. They needed a hand to hold, a gaze that believed in them, a reason to feel that life was not just an endless stretch of emptiness. Sophia did not know where she would begin, but in the stillness of Liam and Lucas's eyes, she noticed the faintest crack, a fragile fracture in the shell of silence. And perhaps all it would take was one spark, one moment strong enough to break it open. That afternoon, Sophia stood in the kitchen preparing lunch. The sound of her knife against the cutting board echoed hollowly through the vast space. At the small table near the window, Liam and Lucas sat as usual, silent and still. Their vacant eyes and neatly folded hands made them look like tiny statues placed out of place. In that moment, Sophia felt her chest tighten. She remembered her own childhood filled with noise, laughter, songs pouring from every corner, even arguments that were loud but alive. In stark contrast, the Hayes kitchen felt drained of life, a place where silence reigned. A sudden urge surged within her, so strong she could not ignore it. Without much thought, Sophia reached into her bag. The small speaker she always carried lay inside. She set it on the counter, drew in a deep breath, and pressed play. Music filled the room, a soulful melody, warm and vibrant, floating through the air. At first, nothing changed. Liam and Lucas remained motionless, their eyes distant. Sophia nearly scolded herself for acting on impulse. But then, something small shifted. Liam lifted his head, his brows furrowed as if questioning what had just happened. Lucas blinked rapidly, then began tapping his heel softly against the leg of his chair. Sophia's heart skipped. She dared not breathe too hard, afraid the moment would vanish. And then, a sound, a tiny laugh. Fragile, trembling, but real. Like the crack of light breaking through a sealed coffin, that laugh tore apart the heavy silence that had smothered the house for 3 long years. Instinct propelled Sophia forward. She set the speaker aside and began swaying her hips to the rhythm. She spun once, letting her hair follow the motion. "Come on, little gentleman." She smiled, knowing they could not hear her words, but hoping her eyes and laughter would carry the meaning. Liam tilted his head, then rocked his body faintly to the beat. Lucas slapped the table with his small hands before sliding off his chair, wobbling as he stood. His legs shook, but his eyes shone with something startlingly close to joy. Sophia gasped inwardly, but covered it with bright laughter. She clapped her hands to the rhythm, encouraging them. "That's it. Yes, that's perfect." Her lips moved, her radiant smile guiding them along. Liam slipped from his chair as well, unwilling to be left behind. The 2 boys began to move around Sophia, awkward, unsteady, but alive. They spun, clapped, and burst into laughter, unlike anything the mansion had ever heard. Sophia bent down, dancing at their level, her vision blurring with tears of joy. In that moment, the kitchen was no longer a hollow room. It became a small stage where 3 souls, a young woman and 2 silent children, found the same rhythm. The rhythm of connection, of joy, thought long dead. And then, a figure appeared in the doorway. Alexander. He had only meant to grab a forgotten file, but his steps froze at the sight before him. Liam and Lucas, his sons whom he believed forever trapped in silence, were laughing, moving, alive with Sophia. The file slipped from his hand unnoticed. A sharp ache struck his chest, not the pain of loss, but something else. Hope, fierce and almost unbearable. The next morning, the Hayes mansion returned to its familiar silence. Yet inside Alexander, the storm had not passed. The image of Liam and Lucas laughing in the kitchen replayed endlessly, a crack he could not seal in the wall he had built for 3 years. He descended to the kitchen, his posture rigid as always. Sophia was slicing vegetables, the knife tapping rhythmically. Liam and Lucas sat nearby, quietly stacking blocks. Everything seemed ordinary, but Alexander knew something in this house had shifted. Ms. Morales. His voice cut through the air, sharp and deliberate. Sophia lifted her gaze, calm yet wary. "Yes, Mr. Hayes?" Alexander folded his arms, his eyes cold. "Yesterday, that performance with the boys. What exactly do you think you were doing?" Sophia set the knife down, slowly wiped her hands on a dish towel, and turned fully toward him. "I was giving them joy. They deserve that." His eyes darkened. "Joy will not raise them. They need structure, schedules, therapy. What you did was nothing but a trick. You're feeding them illusions." The words landed heavy, like a verdict. For a moment, Sophia felt a sharp pang in her chest, but she did not flinch. Leaning against the counter, her voice rang firm. "With respect, Mr. Hayes, joy isn't an illusion. It's the one thing they've been starved of." Silence fell. Only the clatter of wooden blocks filled the air as Liam and Lucas built their tower. Alexander's lips pressed tight, his jaw tense. He was unaccustomed to defiance, especially from someone within his own walls. He wanted to strike back, to crush her with the authority that had carried him through life. But the memory of yesterday's laughter surged, breaking his words apart. At last he forced out a single line, his voice rough. "You've overstepped." Sophia's gaze softened, but her resolve did not. "I'm not replacing the doctors. I don't pretend to have their knowledge. But I see your sons as more than a diagnosis. They are children who crave connection. Yesterday they let me in. That means something, whether you admit it or not." Alexander's hands curled into fists, his chest heavy with truths he could not voice. He turned away, trying to hide the turmoil rising within him. The battle had only begun, between the pride of a powerless father and the fragile hope that refused to die. In the days that followed, tiny cracks began to appear in the mansion's wall of silence. Not because Alexander had changed, he remained stern, withdrawn, hidden away in his office, but because Sophia transformed ordinary chores into moments of life. Folding laundry, once a monotonous task, became a playful show. She held up a pair of socks, made them bicker in squeaky voices. Liam tilted his head, his lips twitching as if resisting a smile. Lucas shuffled closer, eyes locked with curiosity. When Liam finally reached out and snatched the sock character, Sophia pretended to lose, clapping and cheering as if he had just won a grand prize. A hesitant but radiant smile spread across Liam's face, bright enough to light the entire room. When it came time to sweep the floor, Sophia gripped the broom like a racing baton and declared, "Whoever reaches that corner first wins." Of course, the boys could not hear her words, but her gestures and bright eyes carried the challenge. Lucas wobbled forward, determined, while Liam darted after him, small feet thumping hard against the wood. When Sophia collapsed onto the floor, pretending to be out of breath, both boys fell onto her in laughter, their giggles ringing out like bells. Even washing dishes lost its dullness. Sophia dipped her hands into the suds, blowing until bubbles floated through the air like fragile balloons. Liam clapped his hands together with a pop, bursting one before erupting into laughter as though he had just discovered joy for the first time. Lucas pointed eagerly, his eyes wide, his mouth fumbling with sounds, broken syllables that hinted at an attempt to name what he saw. Alexander witnessed it all. He often lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, his face carefully stern. Yet in his eyes, flickers of light betrayed him. Jealousy gnawed. Why could she achieve in weeks what he had failed at for years? But mixed with it was pride and pain. Pride because his sons were smiling, alive. Pain because it should have been Emily, his wife, creating these moments, not Sophia. And so, day by day, the house that once felt like a frozen museum began to breathe again. Laughter, clumsy footsteps, the clatter of wooden blocks, all stitched together into a new melody. Not flawless, not polished, but undeniably their own. One late evening, after the twins had drifted into sleep, Sophia tidied the living room. She bent to collect scattered blocks and papers on the rug. Reaching for a ball that had rolled beneath the shelf, her eyes caught something above, hidden in dust. A silver frame, tucked away where no one ever touched. Balancing on her toes, she pulled it down. Wiping the glass with the hem of her shirt, she froze. Behind it was a radiant woman, eyes shimmering with warmth. Beside her stood Alexander, youthful, smiling wide, in a way Sophia had never seen, his arm wrapped around his wife. Happiness captured, locked in time. Clara, a woman Sophia had never met, yet whose presence lingered in every shadow of the mansion. She gazed long, her chest heavy with reverence and sorrow. This was not merely a memory, it was part of the house's very soul. Instead of placing it back on the high shelf, Sophia gently set the frame on a lower one, within reach of the children's eyes. Instinct told her Liam and Lucas needed to know this woman, not as an invisible absence, but as a love that once lived. The next morning, sunlight filled the living room as Liam wandered by the shelves. He stopped abruptly at the photo, his eyes widened, head tilted. Lucas joined him, curiosity bright in his face. The two boys stood silently, side by side. Then Liam slowly lifted his small hand, shaping a hesitant sign. "Mama?" Sophia's breath caught, her eyes blurred, but her smile remained tender. She nodded softly, whispering, "Yes, sweetheart, that's Mama." Lucas tried to mimic, fingers clumsy but determined. Both stared at the frame, their faces softened by something new. And then Alexander entered. He froze at the sight of his sons before the photograph. In their tiny hands, the sign was imperfect but unmistakable. Mama. A cold ache rushed through his chest. For years he had hidden that image, believing secrecy would shield them from sorrow. Yet here it was, revealed through their fragile hands. He stepped closer, breath caught in his throat. He wanted to snatch the photo away, but Liam and Lucas's eyes glimmered, waiting for him to confirm. In that instant, the wall he had built for 3 years collapsed. "Yes," his voice cracked, trembling like something torn from the depths. "That's Mama." Liam's face lit, his hand pressed to the glass. Lucas leaned into his father's shoulder, murmuring a broken sound. "Ma, Ma." Alexander bent low, gathering them both, tears streaming unchecked. For the first time, he shared Clara with them, not as a ghost buried away, but as a piece of family that had never been lost. That moment, when Alexander held his sons close beneath Clara's photograph, left a mark that could not be erased. The mansion, once suffocated by silence, now held a truth impossible to deny. Clara was still present, not in voice, but in the love reflected in her children's eyes. That night, Alexander lay awake for hours. He realized he had been wrong to believe that hiding memories could protect the boys. In truth, it was the hiding that had hollowed the house. Now, as he watched his sons shape the word Mama with trembling fingers, he knew he could never return to the old darkness. Sophia, quietly watching, sensed it too. The fortress around Alexander's heart had cracked. But memory alone would not be enough to bridge the distance. If father and sons were to find each other again, they needed more than remembrance. They needed a language, a way all three could share. And so Sophia began to search for a way to reach them, not only through music or laughter, but by giving Liam and Lucas the very tools to unlock the world and to open the door that would let Alexander step back into his children's hearts. For many nights after the house had fallen into silence, Sophia sat alone at the kitchen table. Before her lay a notebook filled with scribbles, sketches of hands, arrows marking directions, simple signs repeated over and over. The warm light of the lamp spilled across her tired but determined face. She was no specialist, held no degrees in therapy, but with her whole heart she longed to step into Liam and Lucas's world. If their ears could not hear, then their hands would become the door. That morning, Sophia sat on the floor with the twins. She opened her little notebook, drew in a breath, then slowly lifted her hand. Her fingers shaped a simple sign: play. Her lips formed the word at the same time, her eyes glowing with encouragement. Liam blinked. Lucas leaned forward, studying closely. Then both tried to mimic her. Their tiny fingers trembled, clumsy and incomplete. But Sophia cheered. "Yes, perfect!" She clapped, her eyes shining with pride. The air shifted. The boys giggled, tried again, this time clearer. The room seemed to bloom with light. Sophia continued. She placed her hand against her chest, moving gently into the second sign. Happy. She repeated it slowly, her lips syncing with her gesture. Liam attempted first, a short laugh bursting out when Sophia nodded her approval. Lucas followed, awkward but radiant with determination. Finally, Sophia crossed her arms against her chest, her eyes shimmering. Love. She whispered the word, her voice trembling as if offering a gift. Lucas copied first, hesitant yet resolute. Liam stared for a moment, then folded his arms too. Tears stung Sophia's eyes. From the doorway, Alexander stood frozen. He had never seen his children so engaged, so alive. Each small gesture pierced the fortress around his heart. He longed to step forward, but his hands felt useless, clumsy, unworthy. Sophia looked up, meeting his gaze. There was no challenge in her eyes, only quiet encouragement. Her lips shaped a word without sound. Try. Alexander's throat tightened. Slowly, he raised his hand, imitating the movement he had just seen. The sign was simple, but his fingers shook. His lips formed the word, barely above a whisper. Papa. Liam gasped, eyes sparkling like stars. Lucas burst into laughter, rushing to grab his father's hand. Both boys signed back together. Papa. Alexander's breath broke. His chest shattered open as he bent down, gathering them into his arms, letting tears stream freely. For the first time in years, he was no longer an outsider. He had been called, not by sound, but by a language far deeper, the language of love. News of Liam and Lucas's changes left Alexander torn between hope and unease. He needed confirmation, something stronger than fragile memories of laughter and small signs. So when Dr. Harold Stein, the pediatric neurologist who had followed the twins since birth, scheduled a progress check, Alexander saw it as his chance to prove, to the world and to himself, that his sons had truly improved. That morning, Alexander paced the living room restlessly. Sophia tried to reassure him. They'll show him what they can do. But Alexander only muttered, "We'll see." His voice was tight, brimming with worry. Dr. Stein arrived, calm and composed, carrying a small notebook. He greeted Alexander warmly enough, but the professional detachment in his eyes chilled the room. When he crouched to greet the boys, his smile was purely procedural. Alexander crouched beside Liam and Lucas, urging softly, "Go on, show the doctor. Do the sign. Papa." Liam hesitated, lifted his hand, began the movement. But under the sharp, scrutinizing gaze of the doctor, he froze. His fingers trembled, then dropped. Lucas shrank back, burying his face into Sophia's side. "It's okay," Alexander pressed, his voice quickening. "Do it again. You can do it. Show him." But the more he urged, the more the boys withdrew. The silence stretched, suffocating. Dr. Stein nodded, scribbled a note, and spoke carefully. "Mr. Hayes, what you describe sounds encouraging. But mimicry in moments of play does not equate to lasting progress. These are temporary responses." Alexander stared, stunned, as though something inside him snapped. "No, you're wrong. They are communicating. They're laughing, connecting, things they have never done before." His voice cracked, heavy with desperation. The doctor remained composed. "I understand your emotions, Mr. Hayes, but I must be clear. Moments of laughter do not erase diagnoses. What you see as progress may only be fleeting mimicry. False hope can be more dangerous than silence itself." The words struck like a hammer. Alexander turned toward Sophia, eyes blazing. "You hear that? This is what I feared. You made them laugh, made them mimic you, and I believed it. All of it, just illusions you created." Sophia stiffened but did not falter. She held Lucas close, her hand stroking Liam's back. "No, Mr. Hayes, joy is not an illusion. It's the very thing that has kept them alive this far. They need faith, not cold reports." The room fell into taut silence. Alexander's fists clenched, his throat locked between pride and truth. He longed to argue, but the memory of their bright laughter flooded his mind, choking every word. Instead of admitting it, he turned away, leaving Sophia and the boys beneath the weight of his silence. After that confrontation, the Hayes mansion returned to silence, but it was no longer a silence of waiting. It was a silence heavy as a wet blanket draped over every corner. Alexander locked himself in his office for longer hours, papers scattered, but his eyes empty. He avoided his children's gaze, and especially Sophia's. Inside, anger tangled with shame, wound so tight it had no escape. Sophia continued to care for Liam and Lucas with patience, but her usual radiant smile was gone. Her gentle voice grew cautious, as if any sound might deepen the rift. The twins felt it keenly. They clung to Sophia more than ever, their eyes darting to their father when he entered a room, only to turn away quickly. Their laughter grew rare, their play subdued, quieter than before. The house, which had begun to open to light, shrank back into cold shadows. The fragile hope that had just begun to flicker was smothered again under the dust of pride and tension unresolved. The cold days seemed endless, until one morning Sophia decided to try something new. Sophia laid out bright ribbons across the garden, encouraging the twins to step forward. Strips of red, blue, and yellow lined the path like a secret trail leading to a magical land. Liam and Lucas stared, their eyes flickering with unfamiliar curiosity. "Go on," Sophia signed, her gestures gentle but resolute. She stepped back, letting them choose. Lucas moved first, wobbling but not stopping. Liam hesitated for a heartbeat, then followed. They touched the ribbons, laughing as the wind stirred them, making the colors dance like waves. Then, suddenly, Lucas fell onto the grass. But instead of crying, he laughed, pushing himself back to his feet. Liam watched, copied him, fell, and rose again. Their laughter rang through the air, breaking open the silence that had once ruled the estate. Sophia stood at a distance, her heart swelling with joy. From the porch, Alexander watched it all. His hand gripped the railing, his pulse quickened. He had seen his children stumble countless times before, but never like this, never laughing, never rising with their own strength. Then Liam turned, his gaze finding his father. His small hands lifted, clumsy but deliberate, forming the sign. "Come, Papa." The moment shattered the fortress around Alexander's heart like glass. His vision blurred, his breath caught in his chest. And then, as if years of grief had lost their grip all at once, he stumbled down the steps and ran toward them. He dropped to his knees, arms wide, pulling Liam and Lucas against his chest. A sob broke loose, raw, uncontained, but no longer the sob of loss. It was the cry of a heart brought back to life. The boys clung to his shirt, their lips spilling fractured sounds full of meaning. Sophia stood back, her hand pressed to her chest, tears glimmering through her smile. In that moment, Alexander was no longer the celebrated architect, no longer the widower bound by shadows. He was simply a father, called back by his children for the very first time. That night, when the mansion had fallen into stillness, Alexander could not sleep. The laughter and the image of Liam signing "Come, Papa" echoed in his mind, stirring the deepest corners of his heart. He rose from bed and walked to his study, the room where he had locked his emotions away for 3 long years. The large wooden desk stood in the glow of the lamp, holding memories he had avoided. Alexander sat down, his hands trembling, as he pulled open a drawer he had not touched since Clara's death. Inside lay an old envelope, its edges yellowed with time. He knew exactly what it was. It was the letter he had written to Clara 2 weeks after she passed. A letter never sent, never reread. In it, he confessed his deepest fears, that he was not strong enough to raise their children, that he did not know how to be a father without her, that more than once he had thought of giving up. Alexander held the letter, his vision blurring as the shaky words stared back at him. Memories rushed in. Nights spent outside the nursery door, listening to the boys cry but too paralyzed to enter. He gripped the paper tightly, as if he could crush the haunting years with his bare hands. Unbeknownst to him, Sophia stood at the doorway, quietly watching. He lifted his eyes, red with tears, and without a word handed the letter to her. Sophia unfolded it, reading each line with reverence. When she folded it back, her eyes glistened. "She would have been proud of you, Alexander, not because you were perfect, but because you stayed. You didn't give up." Her words struck like a blade cutting through invisible chains. Alexander bowed his head, tears spilling freely, but this time not tears of failure. They were tears of release. As time passed, the Hayes mansion slowly became a true home. The once cold walls now echoed with children's laughter. Hallways that had stood empty were cluttered with tiny socks and toys scattered across the floor. The house was no longer a silent museum. It was alive in every corner. Liam and Lucas, once quiet and withdrawn, grew unexpectedly lively. They learned new signs: eat, play, love. Their small fingers were clumsy, but their eyes glowed with pride whenever they managed to communicate. And then, one morning, Lucas let out his very first sound, blurred, imperfect, but undeniably an attempt. Sophia burst into tears of joy, while Liam quickly imitated his brother, producing a short sound that sent the room into applause. The greatest miracle of all was that Alexander was no longer on the outside. He sat on the floor with his sons, paint smudged on his hands from their drawings, his shirt wrinkled from playing superhero. He, too, practiced signing, awkward at first, but every time he managed, the boys laughed and threw their arms around him. One afternoon, as Sophia passed the hallway, she paused at the living room door. Alexander sat among toys, Liam perched proudly on his shoulders, while Lucas eagerly tried to teach his father a new sign. Alexander's face, once shadowed by grief, now radiated relief and pride. The mansion that had once been a refuge for sorrow had transformed into a sanctuary of hope. And the Hayes family, once broken, had truly come back to life. The Hayes mansion had changed so completely it was almost unrecognizable. To mark that transformation, Alexander decided to host a small gathering in the garden, not extravagant, not grand, just a few close friends and neighbors who had witnessed the family's rebirth. That afternoon, the garden bloomed with color. On a long table draped in white sat desserts Sophia and the boys had made together, crooked, messy with frosting, but crafted with pride. Liam wore an oversized sun hat. Lucas draped a red scarf like a superhero's cape. They darted across the grass, pausing before each guest, their little hands eagerly signing, "Hello, thank you." Laughter and tears mingled among the guests' faces. Alexander stood at the edge of the lawn, glass in hand, eyes fixed on his sons. But soon his gaze found Sophia, standing beneath a tree, rearranging a tray the wind had shifted. Quietly, he walked over and set his glass beside her. In the glow of sunset, his voice was low, but trembling with truth. "You brought them back to me, and you brought me back to them." Sophia lifted her eyes, her lips trembling. Before she could respond, Alexander took her hand and knelt in the garden in full view of all. Liam and Lucas froze for a beat, then burst into giggles, clapping wildly. "Sophia!" His voice trembled as he sank to one knee, the garden glowing with sunset and laughter. "Will you marry me?" His words broke with emotion, but the resolve in his eyes was unshakable. Tears streamed down Sophia's face. Surrounded by cheers and the innocent applause of the twins, she nodded. Yes. 1 month later, a small wedding took place in that very garden. No grandeur, no spectacle, just friends, neighbors, and 2 little boys leading their mother down the aisle. Alexander looked around, his heart overflowing with peace. The Hayes mansion, once a monument to grief, had become a true home. And they, Alexander, Sophia, Liam, and Lucas, had at last found peace as a family in every sense of the word.